Perfect. I think we're just waiting for people to join and head in. But firstly, I wanted to say to everyone a huge welcome and kind of give you a really warm welcome for our webinar this evening, which is all about sports scholarships in the United States. Just to introduce myself, my name's Christina and I'm one of the Education USA advisors here in the UK. Education USA provides free, unbiased advice all about studying in the United States. And so if you've got any questions about that process more generally or about sports scholarships and the journey of being a recruited athlete, we're also here to help support you and your dream of studying in the US. But it is with great delight this evening that I'm able to warmly introduce Elizabeth Thompson, who is coming to us from the NCAA today, and she's going to give us a really great overview of the process of becoming a recruited athlete in the United States and to share her expertise. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. And we'll get started. And if anyone's got any questions, please use the Q&A box and we will do our very best to answer some of those questions towards the end of this session as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christina, and good evening, everyone, and welcome. And thanks for joining us today. And all things NCAA, especially in the month of March, what we refer to as here in the States March Madness with our men's and women's basketball tournament. So really excited to be able to join you today to talk about all things NCAA, eligibility, and participation in sports. So this is just a brief agenda of what we will be covering today. As you can see here on the screen, we're going to go over the registration process, some background about the NCAA and our three divisions, what courses that need to be studied, how that looks in the, for example, GCSE, British education system. Going to go into what grade point averages mean for U.S. higher education and NCAA specific eligibility. And then we'll go over the requirements for Division 1 and 2 academic eligibility. And then I'm going to close out with some recruiting best practices and resources for you to walk away with today. So a little bit about the NCAA, we're broken up into three divisions. And so this is a little bit of information about the various sports that are offered across our three divisions. So it's important to know that the NCAA does not offer every sport that's out there. So make sure that you take a look at this list to see if your sport is listed there. So for example, if you participate in what's referred to commonly as athletics, in your country, we refer to that as track and field here. So you'll see that there's an indoor and an outdoor track and field season, both in the winter sports and the spring sports. And then some student athletes choose to participate in cross country in the fall, indoor track in the winter, outdoor track in the spring. So there's information on over 27 different sports that we have. Our newest sports are acrobatics and tumbling, stunt, and women's wrestling is our newest championship that we just celebrated and crowned a national champion in all three of our divisions last week. And then our newest emerging sport is women's flag football that was just voted as an emerging sport last January by our NCAA member schools. An important piece of NCAA eligibility, which that is eligibility to compete, to practice with the team, and to be involved in competition and receive a scholarship, means that you have to track on all three of these things. One is what you need to do to graduate secondary school in your country. The second is NCAA initial eligibility, and I'll talk about what those requirements are in just a minute. And then the last piece of that is the college admissions process, which is separate from NCAA eligibility. A lot of people think that if you are actively recruited by a school, that means you're automatically admitted, or if you're admitted, that means you're eligible to compete for the team. They are two separate things that you need to track on. So making sure that you're meeting the academic requirements in order to compete for the school, but then also finding out what is needed to be admitted to that school. The standards for competition and sport are the same across each division. So what grades you need, what grade point average you need, what subjects you need to study to compete for a Division 1 program, regardless of sport, is the same across all Division 1 schools. What you need across all Division 2 is the same. What is different is the college admissions process. So one Division 1 program may have a different standard for admission than Division 2 because each school has the ability to set their own admissions standards. So what it might might take to get into Harvard might be different than what it might take to get into Elizabeth University. So just keep in mind that to do your research as to what schools you're interested in and what their admissions process is, because that is going to look different than NCAA academic eligibility. Another piece to that is knowing about standardized test scores, SAT, ACT, TOEFL scores, English language proficiency scores. All of those may be required as part of that admissions process. So do your research and find out what you need to do to be admitted. SAT and ACT is no longer a part of NCAA requirements for competition, scholarship eligibility on the sports side of things. So it did go away in 2023 from the sports side, but just know that it very well may still be a part of the academic admissions process. So be sure to check with the school to find out what is needed to be admitted to the school you're interested in. And then before I jump into the registration process, I do want to talk a little bit about our three divisions. So the NCAA is broken up into three divisions. So Division One, Division Two, and Division Three. So there are over 1,100 colleges and universities all across the US that offer sports and that are members of the NCAA. And what's important to know, and this is probably the biggest question that I get when I come over to Europe, especially even in the UK, having worked with the Premier League and other sports with a similar system, is that if you are a Division I program, you stay a Division I program. And typically all of the teams at that university are Division I teams. So for example, if I had my own university, Elizabeth University, and I had 24 different sports offered at my university and on the men's and women's side. So say I had 48 teams. All 48 of those teams are Division I women's soccer, Division I men's water polo, Division I track and field, all of those, because I am a Division I university. And our teams do not move up and down depending on how the season goes. So you have, regulation that you're used to, or if you don't do so well, you could drop down to the second division or the third division. That concept does not exist in NCAA sports. So just know that going into it, that if you're researching a school and you like it and it's a Division I, water polo or track and field team or rugby team, it's staying that division level, and it's not going to change unless something astronomically changes to where the whole university's division moves up or down, which does not happen very commonly. So just know that. All right, so let's take a break from that and jump into the registration process. So every prospective student athlete, which is what all of you that are joining our webinar here today are considered prospective. That means you're interested in or considering playing a sport at the NCAA level. Should start by registering with the NCAA. It can happen as young as year 9, key stage 3, form 3, year 9, etc. But it's not required at that age. We just encourage it as young as year 9 so that you understand what is required for eligibility. But essentially, you have to be registered and deemed eligible to compete for an NCAA school before you can actually receive your scholarship and those dollars be released to you and you travel over, get your F1 visa, etc. to come play. So there are 3 different account types in the registration process. I'm going to go through each of them, but just know if you're just starting to explore this process, are interested, would like to learn more information, then you should focus on that free profile page, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. So as I mentioned, 3 different account types, and you can kind of start with the free profile page and choose which area to upgrade to as the recruiting process becomes more serious for you or college coaches reach out. So this is our academic and athletic certification account. This is essentially like the account type that gets you into all 3 divisions once you go through the process to be eligible. It means that you can be certified for all 3 divisions because that's our job. So consider the NCAA like the sport regulating body, like you have, the Premier League, or you have FIFA or FIBA, and they regulate that sport. Our job is to regulate that sport and ensure that all student athletes meet the same requirements to be certified to compete at that division level within our organization. So this particular account type, the academic and athletic certification account, is the account type that can be used to be certified for all three divisions, Division One, Division Two, and Division Three. So if you aren't sure where you want to go and want to have the opportunity at all three division levels, this would be the account type for you. It's what you can sign for an agreement with a school, receive that scholarship. There is a one-time registration fee for international students of $170. Once you have this account, you have it for life. It does not expire. It does not go away. So just know that. We also do have a fee waiver option, and all of this information is on our website. Everything on this PDF or slides here are hyperlinked. I'll provide this to Education USA in PDF form so that they can share it out with the attendees afterwards, post it on their social channels. If you're joining us live on any of those tonight, just know that all of this is information that you can access, but there are fee waiver options. If you might meet those, just take a look at that to see, and then you can explore that option for payment as well. Our second account type is the athletic certification account. This is for international student athletes who know they want to compete at a Division III school. So one of the things we'll talk about later in this presentation is that Division III schools actually do not offer athletic-based scholarships. Everything is academic-based or merit-based scholarships. And as a result, student athletes are just certified on the athletic certification side. So looking at your sports participation history. So that's why there's a separate account type if you know you're going Division III, don't want to pursue Division One or Division Two. A little bit lesser of a fee. It's a one-time US $75 fee. Again, once you have that account, you have it for life. If you start there and then decide you want to explore Division One or Division Two, there is an option to transition that account over to the full account type. So know that that option is there for you. And then that also is for students who might be transferring in from a two-year school or to a Division One or Division Two program that maybe they're eligible based on their university credits. That's something you would work with the NCAA school recruiting you if you're already a university student to figure out which is the correct account type for you. But then last is our free profile page account, and it's exactly that, just free. So if you're kind of starting to learn about the NCAA, figure out if this is the right fit for you and your family, I suggest starting with the free profile page account. At any point during this process, if you begin being actively recruited, becoming more serious about playing at a Division One or Two program, there's a button within that free profile page that says transition my account, and that will allow you to transition over to either that D3 certification account or the one that's for all three divisions, that academic and athletic certification account. But getting the free profile page is great because it gives you a lot of really great information on what to expect as a student athlete, what you need to be doing each year of secondary school in order to prepare for becoming eligible, steps that you need to take along the way, resources on mental health, on from our Sports Science Institute updates, student athlete newsletter. There's really, really great resources in there for you. So I suggest everyone that's at all interested in pursuing this, if you're joining us today, make sure that at minimum you have a free profile page after today. So next we're going to talk about core courses. So in order to be eligible to compete for an NCAA school, you have to be deemed academically eligible. So we'll be looking at certain core areas that our universities have said based on the structure of higher education in the US set student athletes up for success year over year at a US higher education institution or university. So if you are not joining us from a mobile device and have the ability to scan this QR code, please do so. Otherwise, after today's presentation, we'll be able to get you all of these resources in PDF format. You can also find this information on our website, which is eligibilitycenter.org. But this QR code will take you to our core courses for international student athletes. It's going to give you examples of some of the subject areas I'm going to show you on the next slide. So when talking about what you need to do in order to be an NCAA student athlete, we're going to talk about the number of core courses that you need in each subject area, and I'll show you what that means for a student from the UK shortly. But these are the subject areas that we would be looking at either on your GCSEs, your A levels, if you've taken some BTEC coursework, what those need to look like, what subjects we can count. So English, native language, mathematics, sciences, social sciences, etc. And I'll talk in an upcoming slide about the number of GCSEs that you need. But for example, when I say English, like you study an English language and an English literature GCSE. So if you have those two, that's going to satisfy the English requirement. There's also an additional core requirement, which any of those three buckets on the bottom there can be a part of, as well as any additional from above. So if you have an English language and an English literature GCSE, it's going to take the requirement for both of those. Mathematics is just that, mathematics. Sciences, so if you have the trilogy science, that will fulfill that. Biology, chemistry, physics, all of those count as a science. And then for social sciences, we're looking at things like history, government, civics, law, all of those count. Geography, if I didn't already say that one. So lots of things that would count as, I think there's a civilization course as well that counts in the UK, but all examples that you can find in the UK resource, which we'll talk about in an upcoming slide. But these are the subject areas that we would be looking at. If you've taken any foreign languages or world languages, those can also count towards the additional core course requirement. You don't have to have a religion, you don't have to have a philosophy. Those are just some of the areas that can count. So overall, what I tell to UK students is you have to have at least 5 GCSE passes in order to be considered a secondary school graduate from the UK. And then of those, most students have 7 to 12 is what we commonly see for students from the UK. Of those, you have to have one subject pass in each of the 5 core areas. So we need an English, we need a math, a science, a social science, and then one additional exam. So if you have an English language and a lit, if you have 2 social sciences, we can use the better of your second social science or the better of your second English to help fulfill that 5th exam area, which is that one additional exam. If you also have a language and that language is a better exam, the extra English, we can use that. So say you took a Spanish or a Latin and that one turns out to be a better grade, that can count towards that subject area. If you've also studied AS or A levels and have done well in that, so say you did a GCSE in mathematics and you also did an A level in mathematics, if those are both really good grades, you can use both of those to count towards the requirements. So next, we're going to jump into country-specific resources. Same method as the QR code I mentioned a moment ago. If you're not joining from a mobile phone and are able to scan, please do so. Otherwise, know that these resources will be in PDF form posted after this evening's presentation. Once you scan the QR code, that will take you to our newly updated webpage, which just went live within the last few days here. And this is information on over 180 different countries, provinces, territories, etc. So if you are joining us from the UK, which all of you are, you could click on Europe as the box there. You're then going to get a list of countries in alphabetical order. So if you have studied, GCSEs, ASA levels, British education, you would select the United Kingdom as your country to click on in order to get all of the country-specific information. If you are attending an international baccalaureate school, there will be a tab there for international baccalaureate. It's under the I's for IB, and that will give you all of the information there. If you're joining us from an American school abroad, American schools go through a different process than this. So just know that we have resources at the end where you can be in touch with our team to make sure that you've properly registered, and your particular American school would actually have its own dedicated list of approved NCAA core courses, since each school is unique compared to a ministry-wide set of curriculum on the international level. So once you've selected the United Kingdom from that drop-down list, you're going to get a PDF that for the UK specifically is several pages long, but from other countries, it might just be 1 or 2 pages long. It's going to give you background information on, for example, what is year 9 called in that educational system. And that's important because what you take starting in the 9th year of education and up is what matters towards NCAA eligibility. Establishing your graduation timeline in your country is based on NCAA rules, say your initial enrollment in year 9 in any country around the world. So that's why that's important. And that's why we list that information there. What are the graduation timelines within a country? A country like the UK, it's going to vary depending on what you are presenting as an acceptable form of proof of graduation. And a lot of people like to say, well, I took this long to finish this diploma, or I took this long to finish these studies. This is based on what is the standard for full-time enrollment in that program. Sports, music, arts aside, what does it take a full-time student in that program to complete those studies? So that's where you'll see GCSEs typically expected after year 11, A levels completed after year 13, 2 years after the GCSEs. And that matters for later in the presentation when I'm going to talk to you about taking a break between secondary school and enrolling full-time in university and how that could impact your eligibility for an NCAA school. Next, we're going to talk about grade point averages. So first, let's make sure that we all have a base level of understanding when it comes to US grade point averages, or what we commonly refer to as GPAs. We operate on a 4.0 grading scale here, which means A's, your highest grade, is worth a 4.0, B's 3.0, etc. So I'm going to talk to you about how those translate from the UK grading scale for the purposes of today into the US GPA. And then you're also going to hear me reference GPA again when I talk about what the requirements are to be Division I, Division II eligible, and so forth. So when I talk about D1 or Division I eligibility, I'm going to be referencing a 2.3 GPA. So you'll understand by looking at this grading scale, that's between a C and a B average in those core areas. So we're not looking at everything that you studied for NCAA eligibility. We're looking at your core exams. So the best of those 5 exams that I mentioned, and you must be getting more than a C average. You must be trying to aim for more in the B range. So you might be wondering, well, what does that mean on my country's grading scale? So remember, C's 2.0, B's 3.0, and for D1, you need a 2.3 or higher. That's the minimum. So now let's look at those grading scale conversions. So the example at the top here is the GCSE scale. So if you have 5s or above on your GCSEs, which I'm hoping everybody joining us here does, that means that you're a 3.0 student. So you would have no problem hitting that 2.3 minimum GPA for Division I eligibility. Now, keep in mind, the reason I said that's the minimum bar for competition. That's not what you want to aim for. And the reason for that is because every admissions office is different and they may not admit you on a 2.3 GPA. So you want to try and do as well as you can in those exams to try and get as high of a grade point average as possible so that you can be admitted to the school. You can have opportunities at other scholarships, academic or merit-based scholarships, in conjunction with a sports scholarship, which we'll talk about how that can benefit you in the recruiting process. And then I also included an example of the AS and A level grading scale conversions as well, because it's not a direct correlation when it comes to alpha grading scales. So a C on an A level is actually a B on the NCAA grading scale. So if you got a C on your A levels, that's actually a 3.0. So just make sure that you're referencing the country specific information. The IB grading scale is in the IB section, which is different than this GCSE scale. So make sure that you're taking a look at that to see what those grades convert to. So now that we understand what is proof of graduation, what exams you need to take, and how we calculate a GPA, now let's talk about what the minimum requirements are for eligibility. Lots of different outcomes that can happen here, but for the purposes of time today, we're going to focus on qualifier because that's what we want everyone to be. We want everyone to be immediately eligible to receive their scholarship, to practice and compete for an NCAA school upon earning or receiving a scholarship offer. So as a D1 qualifier, you would need those 5 subject areas that we talked about. So if you have those 5 GCSEs, that takes care of those first 2 buckets right there, completing those in year 11, making sure that you have the 5 areas, and then making sure that your GPA is a 2.3 or higher in those 5 GCSEs on that 4-point scale. And what we would do is we would average those 5 GCSEs. So if you had a B in all 5 GCSEs. So say you got a 6, 5 or a 6 on all of your GCSEs. Each one of those is worth a B. Each one of those is 3 quality points on that 3.0 scale. So you have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 divided by 5 exams gives you a 3.0 GPA. So if you had, I'm trying to figure out an easy math one to do. I think if you had all A's, which would be 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, divided by 4, that's going to, or divided by the 5 exams, that's going to be a 4.0 GPA. Say you had all A's and 1 B, that might take you down to 1 quality point less, which might put you just slightly under a 3.8, 3.9 GPA. Someone with a calculator can do the math. As you can see, math was not my major in school, but figuring out your GPA, that's how you would calculate it by adding up the quality points for each of those exams, dividing by the number of exams will give you your grade point average to figure out your eligibility. Again, these are the subject area breakdowns, but focus on the 5 GCSEs that I mentioned on the last one. But if you're joining us from an international baccalaureate school and we're looking at your year by year marks from an IB perspective and you did not do IGCSEs, then we would look at yearly transcripts for this crediting breakdown. Same thing if you're coming from an American school abroad. There are a bit more information on American school requirements, but it's very similar to this. Feel free to reach out to the NCAA afterwards via our contact information and we can get you all of that. It's also posted to our website. And then next, I want to talk about Division II because there are a lot of reasons that I love D2. I myself am a D2 graduate. I really love a lot of the changes that Division II has made in the past few years of giving scholarship opportunities to all student athletes. And we'll talk about what I mean by that. 3 possible outcomes for Division II, but for the purposes of today, I'm going to focus on qualifier and partial qualifier. So if you get those 5 GCSE passes and your average is a 2.2 or higher. So if you remember, D1 was 2.3, D2 is 2.2 GPA, then you would be eligible for your athletics aid or what we refer to as scholarship and to practice and to compete for that Division II school. By rule of thumb, I know this is a lot of information. So if you're joining us, I really take a deep breath, just kind of absorb it all for a minute. By rule of thumb, I tell individuals if you aim to be Division I eligible, by default, you will also be Division II eligible. So if you're feeling overwhelmed at this, I know that this is a lot of information to take in at once. Just know that if you aim for the Division I and you took great notes on the Division I requirements and you work to meet those, you will also be Division II eligible academically. GPA is just slightly different at a 2.2. Subject area distribution works out just the same. So if you got those 5 GCSE passes for D1, they will also meet it for D2. And then this is the piece that I am so proud of Division II and really love to share with all incoming student athletes about opportunities. Again, we understand that things happen. Maybe you were recruited late in the process and you didn't know that you needed a social science because it's not mandatory in the UK as a required subject. Maybe something happened, around the time of your GCSE exams where you were going through something as personally or as a family that was pretty traumatic that impacted the result of your exam and you aren't able to meet those minimum GPA requirements. We understand that. Division II understands that. Division II a few years ago changed to where if you are admitted to that Division II school based on their admissions requirement, then by default, you are at minimum a partial qualifier. And what that does is that gives you access to a scholarship and to practice with the team. It is what we refer to as redshirting. And what that means is you can be a part of the team, you can practice with the team, have a scholarship. You just cannot compete in any official competitions that first year. So that helps you acclimate to campus, to the university, really work on becoming a full-time student and a full-time athlete, because we always say here at the NCAA, you are a student first, athlete second. So it's important for you to be able to make that transition to being a full-time student at our university's campuses, but yet still being involved with the sports program and with the team and practicing with the team. You're going to have academic advisors, tutors, mandatory study tables. There are so many things in place that help support your success as a student athlete. So the fact that student athletes actually graduate at a higher rate than just your student body on campus. So really take a look at Division II for all different opportunities. But if something happened to where you feel you aren't meeting the Division I or II qualifier requirements, and just know that there are options for a partial qualifier to be able to still get a scholarship or athletics aid, as we call it, at the Division II level. Everything that I just covered about all of these academic requirements can be found on our initial eligibility flyer. So this is a great resource that summarizes everything that I just covered for you today. And then to touch on Division three does not offer, excuse me, sports scholarships. And what that means is everything is academic or merit-based scholarships. And as a result of that, Division three student athletes don't have nationalized academic requirements like I just covered for Division one and Division two. So they do have to go through the athletics certification process in order to be certified as an amateur in their sport and ensure that they're meeting the Division three amateurism requirements. So that's why that athletics certification account is the proper account type for those Division three student athletes. So next we're going to touch on submitting academic records and what you need to know and what you need to submit in order to be deemed eligible to compete at an NCAA school. So we do require the transcripts or your GCSE certificates to be sent directly by an NC or by a secondary school on your behalf. So you are not able to submit those yourselves. We do require school stamped copies of the exam board issued certificates. So for example, we cannot accept a school list. I know a lot of secondary schools in the UK are able to get an exam printout list where they've combined everything in their system. We actually need copies of like AQA, OCR, Edexcel, Pearson, those actual certificates, and even a provisional statement of results is acceptable from the school as long as it is the exam board issued one and not the school making a condensed list of all of your exam results. So just make sure that you're getting that proper list for them. They would then just scan those and email those in, and I'll talk about how they would do that. But you want to make sure that you're getting those from the schools. If you're attending an American school, they have the ability to upload your American school transcript directly in their system. So American schools have an online login with us where they maintain their approved core courses and upload their transcripts. So that's the process there. But what you're submitting are your GCSEs, any additional AS, A levels, BTECs, NVQs, lots of different options within the UK from an educational perspective as to what you can be studying. We also have a grad timeline confirmation form that you have your school fill out on your behalf. So keep in mind that when you register with the NCAA, you're going to get a welcome email and you're going to get a checklist of what documents you should submit to the NCAA. So make sure that you're reading through that. You should even get a cover sheet as to what to take to your school that would make sure that they're sending all of the right things to us as far as what's needed. So just work with your secondary school, get them the information that you get in the registration process so that they can email all of that over to us. I won't spend a lot of time on the translations just because kids from the UK don't typically need to provide translations. Everything's already in English. But those documents, once we get those, should come from your secondary school via the secondary school, like records keeper or counselor or whomever that you work with at your school, exam person, to ec-processing at ncaa.org. They should not email those until you have registered with the NCAA first, because when you register, you're given a 10-digit NCAA ID number. That should be in the subject line of their email along with your name so that we know what account to match those up to once you send those to us. It will be a much faster matching process if we have your NCAA ID number. So keep in mind that we want those to be directly from the secondary school, ministry office, issuing body, etc. This should be coming direct from the source. So next, we'll take a break, a breather from the academic portion and the requirements portion to talk about what most student athletes want to hear the most about, which is about the recruiting process and how it works. So many times I've come across the pond to the Fulbright and Education USA's college fair that they hold every September over in London. And I'm sad that I was not able to be there this past September, but I would say the number one question that students and parents ask me when they walk up to my booth is, I'd like to apply for a sports scholarship. And how do I get recruited? And the most important first piece for you to know in this process of how sports work in the US when it comes to NCAA schools is that you do not apply for a sports scholarship. It is unlike any other scholarship process in higher education, in universities, in that you are not applying for it. One is being offered to you from the coach of that team that is recruiting for that sport. So there is no standard, application process. It is that coach is out there looking all across the world for, the next tennis player or the next midfielder in football, or what we call soccer here, but I know enough from my future in-laws not to call it that. Went on a call with the UK. It's just to make sure that you are looking and working with those coaches and reaching out to those coaches to show your interest. So there is a process in which you can promote yourself as a prospective student athlete that has interest in being a part of that particular university's team, but there's not an application process that you would submit your application and, be chosen. It is that these coaches are out there looking for what position, what talent, what's missing from their team, whether it's a team sport or an individual sport, what those times look like for that university. So, for example, I did swimming as one of my sports, and if you are competing based on a certain time in, your 200 fly or 50-meter breaststroke, that time is going to be pretty consistent across top Division I schools within a few seconds. So if you're looking at a Division I program and you're 10 seconds off from where people are performing in that event, that coach may not be recruiting you, most likely not recruiting you for that team. But if you look across, there are over 300 Division I programs, as well as Division II and Division III programs. Take a look at some top level Division I schools, mid level, lower level, and you can find those by looking up NCAA Division I swimming rankings or tennis rankings. But sports with individual times, like track and field, or what you refer to as athletics, swimming, those are ones that it is much easier to be able to figure out, are you at that level, or is that level of competition obtainable for you in the next few years? So look across Division I, II, and III programs and figure out where those programs are and if that would be a fit for you. And if you think it's obtainable in the next few years in the recruiting process, reach out to those programs, those assistant coaches, position coaches, and express your interest in being a part of that program. By definition, recruiting for us are things like coaches making a phone call to you, sending you a WhatsApp message or a text message, emailing you, sending you a direct message on social media. If they were to visit one of your club teams over at your school or come to see you compete on an international competition circuit, those are all things that would be considered active recruiting. If they're offering you a scholarship in writing or financial aid, all of that means that you're being actively recruited and in this process. And in order to be actively recruited, we want to ensure that you first have your NCAA account set up, which allows those coaches, they're going to ask you for your NCAA ID number, that 10-digit ID number that you get upon registration. That is what you need to provide to the coaches in the recruiting process so that they can then actively recruit you in our system, make sure that you're being deemed eligible, that they can release the scholarship money to you so that you can then get what's called a Form I-20, which is what you need for your F1 visa appointment with the embassy or consulate. So for most sports, recruiting can begin as early as year 9, but it's really just informational materials being sent to you. In most cases and in most sports, that active recruiting can start the summer after 10th grade or year 10. I would say for most UK students, it typically starts after completion of GCSEs, and that's when the recruiting window really opens up for coaches to be able to have communication with you. If you are not hearing from a particular coach or hearing back from a coach that you reached out to, it could be that they're not interested in you, but it's not necessarily the case. It could be that it's a period in which coaches are not allowed to be doing active recruiting. So we have recruiting calendars broken down by division and by sport that break down when coaches are allowed to have communication. So we have things called contact periods, evaluation periods, quiet periods, dead periods, and then full recruiting shutdowns. So times of the year where no recruiting is allowed to happen. That allows them to focus. A lot of times that's during their championship of their sport at their division level, or during like a holiday, like a Christmas break, or maybe it shuts down for 2 or 3 days. But you can find all of this information on our website. I'll also, when we get to the end of this presentation, drop those into the resources section for you in the chat so you can find your particular sport to figure out when those recruiting periods are. A lot of this information I talked about at the beginning of this recruiting section, but talking to those around you about what might be the best fit for you, researching your particular sport. If it's a team sport, watch some YouTube or any type of online footage of the teams of the schools that you're interested in to figure out if you feel your competition is at that level or has the ability to get to that level. If it's an individual time sport, take a look at those times and figure out if that is within reach, and look at all options across all divisions, figure out where those schools are located. We have an online membership map in our resources that shows you a map of the United States. You can sort by the sport you're interested in, and that's going to show you where they are. You can then break it down by division. So if you're interested in Division 3 water polo or Division 2 men's wrestling, you can search by that and they'll show you where they are located all across the United States. And making sure that you're finding a school in the campus that's the best fit for you. If you've grown up your whole life in a very metropolitan area where there's lots of city and lots going on, choosing a school that's out in the middle of Texas in the heat where there is no public transportation and poor cell phone service and not a lot to do off of campus, that might be a culture shock for you. So make sure that if you are choosing a school like that, that you're trying to connect with their international admissions office and services to find and connect with other international students, maybe even from your country or your city, to ask them what was it like transitioning to that particular campus and to see what is the best fit for you. So me, for example, I grew up in large cities my entire life. And when I came to taking my visits to the schools that I wanted to choose, I looked at Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3 because I wanted to have all options. What I really liked about the Division 1 school was how busy campus was and how many students there were and how much there was to do. What I loved about the Division 3 school were the small class sizes, which is very common for a Division 3 school. I really liked the fact that at a Division 1 program, I was one of 400 students in a lecture hall. But at the Division 3, I was one of 25 students in a lecture. And it felt more like a more engaging, there was more opportunity to connect with my professors and really have that one-on-one private education that I wanted. But then Division 2, which is where I ended up landing, but what I loved about it was the school that I selected was located in a city, which is where I grew up in cities my whole life. And it had that small campus classroom size feel. So I got the best of both worlds in that. And I give you that example, and it really is important. It isn't just about the sport and the team and the participation and the play time. It was what's going to make me successful and enjoy my college career over the next 4 to 5 years. And those were things that were really important to me when it came to my education, what I was studying, and what my campus experience was going to be like, and what I could do outside of the day to day. So all of those things are things that you should take into consideration. Team time demands and travel time demands are something that you should consider as well in the process. And then just a few other things is making sure you're monitoring your email and that you're doing everything that you need to when it comes to tasks in your NCAA account. So making sure that you're monitoring the account that you register with, making sure nothing goes to your spam folder or your trash, and that it's actually coming into your inbox. Log in and check your NCAA account periodically. We have a really big date coming up April 1st for those students who plan to enroll in fall of 2026. So this upcoming August, September time period, you'll need to log into your NCAA account to request your final athletics certification on April 1st. So make sure that you're monitoring your account, because if more information is needed as a part of that review, that's how we communicate with you, is via those tasks in your account and your emails. So here's a really great reminder that that's coming up on April 1st, and be sure to check into your account and watch that. And then with that, Christina, if it works for you, I will keep the resources page up here. I have, as we're kind of talking through the questions, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't read any of the questions online, so I might need you to request or read those to me. But this goes over our International Student Athlete Handbook, newsletters, registration checklists. If you have follow-up questions after today that we don't get to, you can scan that QR code that will connect you with the Eligibility Center. If you go to our website, eligibilitycenter.org, click on International Students Contact Us, it'll take you there as well if you aren't able to scan the QR code. So just know that that is out there. I have one more slide on name, image, and likeness, and then I'll pull up for our social media handles while we go through the questions, if that works. So we've had lots of questions about name, image, and likeness. Just know that as an international student athlete, there are no restrictions from an NCAA perspective around name, image, and likeness rules, but there may be some challenges for you around F1 visa and making sure that you're staying within compliance of F1 visa rules as it pertains to income. So I always encourage you work with a college or university that is recruiting you. Maybe ask them if they have an immigration attorney that they use in that process to make sure that there are no visa or immigration issues while you are on campus. You never want to be in violation of your visa by doing anything or partaking in anything that could jeopardize that. So always make sure you're very proactive. Ask before you sign anything, ask before you accept anything to make sure that it's not jeopardizing your visa status during your time as a student athlete here in the US. But there are no NCAA rules that would prohibit you from participating in name, image, and likeness. Those are open to all students. Just be sure to do your homework as an international student if you're coming over on an F1 visa. So with that, I'll leave our social media handles up here. I would encourage you to follow us on all of our socials so that you're getting real-time updates and reminders of all things that you need to do to become eligible and to stay on track. But then I'll turn it over to Christina if you have any questions from the group.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And yes, if anyone's got questions, please do use the Q&A box. We will work our way through them. We have about 10-15 minutes, so we'll see what we can get through. And then if you've got other questions after that, we can go from there. So I'm just going to kind of group some of the ones that have come through together. What I wondered, Elizabeth, is if, and it's fine if we can't go all the way back, but there have been some questions about which sports are kind of considered an NCAA sport, whether that's rugby or I'm trying to see if there's any other ones that have come up, but just to kind of talk through the way, they work.
Absolutely. While we're doing that, I have no problem clicking back through here. If everyone's patient with me clicking through it, I will get us back to that slide. I know this slide deck like the back of my hand, so I know right where to go. But that's a really good slide to have up here that covers all of the different NCAA sports. So we're almost there, guys, I promise. So like I said, we have lots of new sports. Rugby is offered at the women's sport level. It is not men's rugby is not an NCAA sport. One thing to keep in mind for those that aren't familiar with how sports work in the US is that these are varsity sports that offer scholarships that are championship and emerging sports through the NCAA. That does not mean that there aren't schools that have a men's rugby team or that have other teams that aren't listed here. It just might be at the club or intramural level, which means that those aren't sanctioned or governed by the NCAA. So there might be, for example, like a rowing is another one. I get a lot of questions about rowing from students from the UK. Women's rowing is, men's rowing is not. So that's where you will see that on here. We will see some men's rowers that will participate at the club team level, but then be on the practice squad to help out with the women's team. So all questions to ask in the recruiting process. It just means that if you practice with the women's team, you have to go through the NCAA process to be eligible. But if you're solely playing on the men's rowing team, you do not have to go through NCAA eligibility. You would just work with that college or university as to what's required for a scholarship with them. It's just not governed by us.
Perfect. And I guess in terms of team sports, there's been some questions about how you can stand out and you're kind of going through the recruitment process amongst kind of your peers and your teammates.
Yeah, a couple of different things that I always suggest to international student athletes. I like to give multiple options because I know that things vary from student to student on what your abilities are. So my first suggestion is going to be kind of the easiest and no cost kind of way to stand out, and that is creating yourself a social media page that is dedicated solely to you and your sport. So, for example, coaches are very active on X and on Instagram. Those are the two platforms that they recruit on the most based on some of our research and surveys that we've sent out to our coaches. So, creating yourself a free X account, or what we used to call Twitter, creating yourself an Instagram that is you in the team's jersey that you are most known for. So if you are known for playing for a certain academy or swimming for a certain team, make sure that that's on there, your full name, because there might be, you know, 300 John Smith swimmers on Instagram. How are they going to find you? Well, they know that they're looking for one based in London, United Kingdom, that swims for this particular club. So put that information in there. Put your class of, like, if you are planning to come to an NCAA school in 2028, class of 2028, you can put your NCAA ID number, create that free profile page, put that 10-digit ID number. Lots of students put that in their bio section at the top. If you have particular times or your GPA, all of those quick stats, your position, if you're a midfielder, put that on there, your team, etc. And then make your grid on Instagram, for example, all things that are highlights about you and your sport. And be sure to keep it just to that. Keep it to your sport. Keep it to national options that you've had as far as competitions, information, sports resumes. You can pin one to the top of your grid that could be an image that has, like, this rating. If you're in tennis, like, this is where I am on the ITF rating, this is what my grade point average is, this is, another accolade that I have. So there are ways to make yourself stand out. And then when you are emailing universities, so say you're interested in attending, I'm making this one up so that I'm unbiased in all of our 1,100 schools, but say you're interested in attending Elizabeth University. You look up my university online, you come to the main university webpage, click on the athletics department. Once you get to the athletics department, you're going to see another tab that says staff directory. Click on the staff directory. Almost all universities have their athletic staff directory broken down by sport. So if you're interested in tennis, go to the tennis staff directory. That is where you will see head coach, assistant coach, teams, position coaches, all of those you will see in there. As I said earlier, never email the head coach. The head coach is way too busy. They are not responding to those emails. Start with a position coach or an assistant coach of who you're emailing first. Do not send out a blanket email to all 500 coaches across the NCAA that you're interested in, because they will not open those. During peak recruiting season, they are getting upwards of 300 to 500 emails a day. So you need to make your email stand out. I do these presentations all year round with Division 1, 2, and 3 coaches, and every single coach will say, I want to hear from the student, not from their parents, not from a recruiter on their behalf, because I'm recruiting the student. So they want to see, how do you write an email? How do you communicate? Are you responsible? Are you on top of those things? Are you eloquent in your speaking and your writing? All of those are things that they want to look at. Are you professional? So all of that to consider. They want to know that they are not on a mass send list and that they're one of 500 coaches. So for example, if I'm the tennis coach at Elizabeth University, say, hey, coach, really great job at that D2 championship this year. So excited for you and your team. I see that the school is located in Houston, Texas. I visited there with my family and really loved, getting a chance to go visit the rodeo and see this particular event. And I know that your school has a really great program when it comes to sports broadcasting. That's something that's of interest to me. Here are some stats on my academics, and here's some stats on my performance in my sport. Here are a link to my social media channels. Here's my YouTube that highlights some of my professional acclimates. Let me know if you have any questions. I would love to follow up and have a conversation with you. Do that. That's a really great way to make yourself stand out. The intro of the email, if you play for a national team, put Elizabeth Thompson, U17 national team, United Kingdom recruiting, like something like that to catch them. So whatever you feel is a really standout point of yours, put that in that catchphrase. don't be afraid to use ChatGPT to help you come up with something. Use some type of AI, not to write your emails, and don't use it for that, but use it to try to come up with some ways, or like, what are ways that I can catch a coach's attention in a, oops, sorry, I lost my headphone, in the subject line of an email. But put that information in there so that they can really get their eye. And then be mindful, if you're creating a highlight video, coaches love to see those on YouTube, but don't put some music. They like it to music. They have said that, but don't put music in there where every other word is a swear word. Don't put, make sure that you're being tasteful in it, that you're showing, more than just a trick shot or a hat shot. Make sure that you're giving some time of full play so that they can see how you're moving up and down the field, et cetera. Those are the things that coaches like to see in the recruiting process, to know that you're taking this seriously and that you're advocating for yourself. So a lot of people use recruiting services, but they are not by any means a requirement. Sure that they help. If you have the means to be able to use a recruiting service, go for it. But I always tell students that you can do this on your own. And then the last tip that I always share, trying to go from that middle ground, mid ground, to like full financial means to be recruited however you see fit, is if you have the opportunity to come over to the US to compete in a showcase, especially in the spring and summer months. A lot of our campuses hold spring showcases, summer mega camps, and those are ID camps where, say, one particular Division 1 or 2 school is holding a 2-day camp or a 1-day camp, where there might be 150 coaches from all around the area at Division 1, 2, and 3 programs that come to watch all of the players that have signed up for that camp run drills, do times, scrimmage, all of those things. That's a really good opportunity for them to see a lot of prospects in one condensed area. So that would be my easiest win, middle, and then a little more challenging, depending on your means, ways to get yourself recruited by NCAA coaches. But also look for ID camps in your region, in your part of the world, especially sports like football, or as we call it here, soccer. Lots of ID camp opportunities and recruiting time, especially in December during the recruiting time after championship. You'll see some college coaches go over to Europe and go to some of those ID camps. So do your research, see what's on your side of the pond. If there's nothing that fits your schedule, or if there's nothing in your area, look and see if you have the means to be able to do something in the summer.
Perfect. And just to add on, I guess, because there have been quite a few questions about whether you need to do this through an agency or kind of recruiters. And as Elizabeth said, if you have the means and that's something you're interested in doing, that's one option. But we at Education USA are firm believers that it is possible to do that independently. And there's information on our website. So we have a checklist that you can work through that breaks down the recruiting process, like as Elizabeth has done today, that helps students and families to kind of do this process independently. If you are working with recruiters, that's fine. We just recommend that you do your due diligence, that you understand what is being offered as part of that, with a recognition, right, that no one can guarantee recruitment and scholarships. That is ultimately between you and the university as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Conscious on time, there were some questions about how you can, and I think you did talk about this in the presentation, but just to recap, how you can understand what level or what standards you're playing at, and how you can kind of research that to know what division you might be eligible for.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll go back to that slide. I've actually found the slide bar along the bottom, which makes it much quicker to get back there. So this is the slide where I said, really talking with your support system about what level of competition that you think that you should aim for. The landscape of college athletics in the US, especially at the NCAA level, continues to change and continues to evolve. So if you're getting advice from someone my age who has not been involved in athletics in the last 20 years, you might want to touch base with maybe some friends of yours on social media that are going through the process more recently, or people like Education USA office and the NCAA that are regularly interacting in this space, to where we have up-to-date information for you on what the recruiting process and landscape looks like, because it has changed so much year over year. So even someone that went through the process 5, 6 years ago, it is completely different than what it's looking like now in the college landscape. So making sure that you're talking to support systems that have active engagement in the last 1 to 2 years in this space to know what is a best fit for you. Also, if your end goal, if you say, I want to be at this really prestigious Division I program, know that it might not be something that's a direct path right out of high school. The paths look a little different now. So maybe it's that you start at a, NAIA or a junior college, or you start at a university in the UK, and then down the road you transfer. Maybe you start at a Division III or a Division II program, which has really great, really strong academics that has less of the time demands that there are at the sport. And sometimes, I always tell people, the Division II school that I went to, our Division II swimming team were national champions. And there were many Olympians from all around the world on our swimming team that would beat a majority of Division I swimmers. So just because a team is Division II does not mean that it's not the top talent in the world. So Division I has over 300 programs. Division II has 200 plus programs. So your top Division II teams are going to be better than a large majority of your Division I. So don't think it's all 300 in some Division I schools and then the Division II and then Division III. Not at all. You see Olympians competing at all three levels. It is what is the best fit for you, whether it be from the subject that you're studying, time demands, competition, fit of a coach and a program. Look at all of those things in that recruiting process.
Perfect. I'm conscious on time, Elizabeth, but the final question I guess I wanted to ask, there are a few that asked this.
Yes.
How does taking a gap year affect the eligibility and recruitment timeline?
Absolutely. So one of the things that's important to know is the rules for taking a gap year vary from sport to sport. I will, if it's okay here for at the end of it so that I can drop it into the chat, I will stop sharing my screen because I do have a really great one-pager that I would love to share with this group that talks about that. And it also even talks about it specific to students from the UK. So I will put that in there. Just know that there are rules that say if you continue to compete outside of your grace period or your gap year in your sport, that you could begin to lose seasons of competition at the NCAA level. So please make sure that you're being mindful of it in that process. I'm going to click on it here in just a moment and drop it into the chat. It is literally called taking a break between college, secondary school, and college enrollment. So I'm going to put it here in the chat for all of you to see. It will go out to, it says hosts and panelists. So Christina, you might have to get that to go into everyone, but perfect. Wonderful. So lots of really great resources in there. I'm also going to give you a few that talk about like use of a recruiting service or a scholarship agent, being represented or marketed by a professional sports agent, prize monies, all of those things and how those could impact your eligibility. Those are all on the second link that I provided there, Christina. So if you could share those as well, I think that would really benefit this group to have those.
Yeah, if it's not come through yet, but I can definitely share that. You should be able to toggle it to say everyone, and then that might allow you to send that more broadly. But
it's only letting me select you or you and panelists. I'm not sure why in the chat. So
no worries. If not, what we can do is send that out alongside the recording. We can send all of these resources so that you've all got a chance to kind of review through those. And then if you've got questions, you can be in touch with us. And I know that there are lots of questions in the chat. We unfortunately have run out of time. So again, if you've got questions they've not been answered today, please do email us. You can also use our contact form on our website, and we can kind of pick up with you there on a more one-to-one basis as well. And then at the following this webinar, we will work to have this recording shared with you alongside the resources that Elizabeth has talked about today. So just wanted to say a huge thank you to you, Elizabeth, and to everyone for attending. Hopefully it's been a really helpful initial starting point for all of you, and particularly for those of you thinking about kind of this athletic recruitment journey. We are wishing you a fantastic evening. Elizabeth, thank you again, and we will speak soon.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye bye.